So this is Chapter 1, Lesson 4, Commutative and Associative Properties. We've already done commutative and associative properties earlier in the year, but we're going to make it have to do with algebra now. So let's get through these first three definitions. A term is a number, variable, or the product of numbers and variables. So for instance, 3 is a term. The next term might be the letter x as a variable. The next term might be 4x, and that would be the product, which means multiplication, of numbers and variables. Like terms are terms with the exact same variables. Notice I say terms. That means that's plural. And W / means with. So terms with the exact same variables. So for instance, 3x plus 4x. Those are like terms. I could have 5xy and 6xy. I might have a subtraction sign between them. This is one term plus another term, and they're like because they have the exact same variables. Even though this has two variables, this has the exact ones. Now what if I were to write 6x squared y plus 3xy? Are these like still, or are they unlike? Hopefully you said unlike, and I'll draw my line that separates the two. And unlike terms are terms with different variables. Although this seems like they're the exact same, remember that x squared means there are two of those x's, so they are not exactly alike. Something that's easier to tell would be if it was 10p minus 2q. Obviously that's easier because they have very different variables. Now, commutative and associative property. I challenge you, pause the video and write an example of numbers with commutative and numbers with associative property. Remember, there should be two types because there's addition and multiplication for both of them. Try. So for commutative property, I have 3 plus 4 is equal to 4 plus 3. 5 times 6 is equal to 6 times 5. Yours should be similar to mine, and if for some reason they're not and you want me to check tomorrow, feel free to bring it in. Feel free to add my two examples if you want, or yours are fine if they're similar. The rules are the numbers stay the same, but the order changes, and it only works for addition and multiplication. Now associative property is 1 plus 2 plus 3, and the groupings around 1 and 2. I keep the exact order, but I change the grouping. Now let's look at it in multiplication. Same exact order, but the grouping changed. So order stays the same, but the grouping changes. Now with algebra, an example of this that becomes important is if we were to have 5 plus a. Now the problem is we like to have an order when we're dealing with algebra, so it makes more sense to us. If you have letters in random places, it becomes much more confusing. So how I would use commutative property is I would change it to a plus 5. Those are the exact same thing, but it's a better order. The variable comes first, and we will talk about this being the constant at a later point, but that constant comes second. Now with multiplication, remember if you get a variable and it's times a number, it's not the best way to see it. The best way to see it is to change the order. 4 times a. And that is commutative property. And I'll continue to ask that throughout the year. Now associative property becomes important when I have a question like this. If I had a plus 3 plus 4, and I grouped a and 3 together. Now a and 3 cannot be added because they are unlike terms. There is no variable for 3. So what I'm going to do is change it and do a plus 3 plus 4, and put the parentheses around 3 and 4. Those would be like terms and they could be combined because neither of them have a variable. Now let's see this in place for A and B. Now as we get good at these, we of course will not have to do this for every one, but I will constantly ask you, what tool are you using? What property are you using when you simplified? If you can't give me a property, then you have simplified incorrectly. So for instance, when we look at A, I would start off and say, hey, M and 7 cannot be combined. So I'm going to change the parentheses, and I have to remember that even though that's minus 2, remember it's really saying M plus 7 plus a negative 2. As long as I keep that minus with the 2 or the negative with the 2, then we can think of this as really being added. You're just adding a negative 2. So I'm going to write M plus 7 minus 2, and I'm going to put the parentheses around the M in the 2. Now to be able to change the parentheses but keeping the same order is the associative property. So we're not going to abbreviate. I really want you to be able to spell these right and really look at it to make sure that you're spelling it correctly. Now this would be associative property, and you could abbreviate in that way by writing addition there. Now the next step is we're going to write M plus 7 minus 2 is 5. And I took the answer to that and put it here, so that would be substitution. Okay, let's try B. Now for B, in this case, that y and that negative 3 could be simplified and I could change the order, but it's not really going to help me get these two numbers together. And because these are all being multiplied, I can use a different property. So I'm going to go ahead and change this and write y times negative 3 times negative 12, and that would be the associative property again. But in this case, it's of multiplication. So now I'm going to multiply those and pull it out. So y times a negative and a negative is a positive. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. So now I'm going to use substitution. And finally, I don't like that 36 to be in the back. I really want it in the front. So 36y, that would be commutative property. You can abbreviate property, and then of course this one is of multiplication. Let's try 2 more, and then I'll let you try some on your own. Let's try C. Negative 3 and h, I really want to get them together. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to get 13 and negative 3 together. So I'm going to change the parentheses, but not the order. I can't do both at the same time, and I don't want to. I kept the same order, and I just changed the grouping. So that should be associative property of multiplication. Okay, so the next one, I'm just going to take that out and get the answer of 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 1 is 3, and it's negative 39h. I use substitution to make that happen. Okay, number 9 has a few more steps. Lots of things I can do. The thing that I need you to understand is that you have to do one step at a time. You can't do more than that. So I'm actually going to do this first, but I could have simplified the front first. It's really my choice. So I'm going to go ahead and do 7 plus p plus 22. Got to keep that in the same order. And I have 9 divided by 9. So that, remember, is 9 times 1/9. And that gives me 1. Remember, that's multiplicative inverse property. That's my favorite answer for that. So multiplicative inverse. So that's going to give me the number 1. Now what's anything times 1? And we know that anything times 1 is 1 because of the multiplicative identity property. Now, we really want to get the 7 and the 22 together. Now, I don't want to move the 22 to the front because I need P to come first. We like our number to come in the back. So I'm going to switch the P and the 7 around, and I would call that commutative property of addition. And then I'm going to take that 7 and the 22 out and get 29. Now, when I take that out, it's going to be substitution. Now the next ones are examples. Some of you are probably feeling like you've really got it and you want to try it, and some of you are feeling like you don't want to do it on your own. That is your choice. If you want to push yourself further, I'll group you with people that push themselves further, and then you might get through your homework tomorrow in class. But if you want to come in and do it with us and really feel comfortable, feel free to try the next set of examples. So you would try examples 1 through 6 right now, and tomorrow we'll finish up the rest when you come in. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.